I didn't write this to entertain anyone. This is catharsis for me. This is something I've lived with for a long time and only told a handful of people. I needed to write it down to help me make sense of what happened. I always remember how cool and crisp the air was that October. There was always a gentle breeze up in the Shaolin Mountains, despite the dense growth of the trees. My childhood best friend, we'll call him Dave, lived on the top of the mountain range. His parents had a house at the end of a long road, dotted with mansions, owned by millionaires. Their house was in the centre of the cul-de-sac, a dwarf by comparison. Nobody complained since the nearest neighbour was half a mile away. We were both 17 at the time, and both out of school. Dave was in a trade programme learning something mechanical. I had dropped out of school early to start college. We had an odd overlap where neither of us were working or going to class that fall. Dave and I spent that time in the woods behind his parents' house. Our favourite pastime was getting stoned and wandering through them. His parents were an odd mixture of hippie and yuppie, made good money but didn't give a damn about getting high. But we still preferred to hide it from them. I guess it kept the thrill of doing it alive. So, we cleared out a section of the woods and built a small fort. It had a short wall around the circular clearing, with log seats and a small fire pit, although we never actually got around to having a fire there. There was always talk of camping out overnight, but nothing ever really came of it. The wooded area behind his house was state land, so nobody went out there. Hunters tended to keep to the lower valley nearby, where the deer were more plentiful. In all the time we were out there, we never saw a soul. No hikers, hunters or rangers. I can't recall a single time in all the time we hung out there where we stayed out past dark. It was never really anything we spoke about. We would make the decision to head back inside as it became twilight. It felt like the right time to leave. Neither of us ever had bad feelings or got creeped out. It was a place we enjoyed being. That was until October came around, and changed that for me. And I never looked at those woods the same after. I ended up living with Dave and his family through the entirety of the fall. My parents didn't agree with my decision to leave school. We spent more and more time in the woods, and our fort became a well-travelled destination. I could make my way there blindfolded despite how dense the trees were and how confusing the path was. We were at home in those woods. I slept on a futon in Dave's bedroom on the second floor, down the hall from the upstairs bathroom. I woke up sometime after midnight and went to take a piss. I remember passing by Dave while he slept. When I left the bathroom a few minutes later, I saw Dave standing at the bottom of the dark staircase, looking up at me. He was fully dressed and wide awake. Not wanting to wake his parents, I quietly asked him what he was doing down there. His response in a stage whisper was, "Psst, I want to show you something." He walked into the dark hallway next to the stairs, and I heard the back door open. That door opened onto the deck, which was facing the woods where we spent all afternoon that day. Confused, I grabbed my boots from next to his closed bedroom door and hurried down the stairs. I figured he wanted to sit on the deck and smoke a joint, or go for a walk down the road. We rarely did that due to the lack of streetlights, but it wasn't unheard of. I walked out the back door and onto the deck, expecting to find Dave. But he wasn't there. The outside lights were still off. This was a rule any time after we left at night, otherwise his parents would tear into us. I looked around the area beside the deck and I thought I could make out his silhouette at the edge of the woods. I called out to him and asked him what he was doing, and I told him to come back inside. His response was a hushed, "I want to show you something." And he turned and walked back into the woods. Dave was a hard-headed guy. He worked hard to prove to everyone how tough and brave he was. I assumed he wanted to camp out at the fort, Or he was trying to scare me. I didn't want to go into the woods, despite knowing them like the back of my hand. I remember it well. It was as silent as the grave. No animals, no insects, nothing. That never happened, even when we were on the deck for hours at night getting stoned. I was on edge, but I didn't want to worry about him while he wandered through the trees in the dark. I always looked out for him like he was my brother. He never had a great sense of direction and would get lost even in the middle of the day. I couldn't go back inside and wonder if he was okay. So I followed him. I walked into the edge of the woods, but I couldn't see him anymore. I called out to him and asked him to wait for me or to come back. From deep within the trees, I faintly heard him say, "I want to show you something." I thought my ears were playing tricks on me because he sounded too far away. There was no way he could have made it that far in such a short time. So I walked into the woods. The fort was a good 3/4 of a mile from his house. If I know my way there as well as I think I did, I made it about halfway. I'd stop occasionally to look for him or listen for his footsteps, but I never heard or saw anything. I tried calling out to get him to come back, but he stopped responding. At this point, I woke up enough to realise how terrible of an idea this was, and decided to head back. I figured I'd get a flashlight or wake his parents up to get their help. Maybe something was wrong with him, and he wasn't in the right frame of mind. I turned around and started back towards the house. I didn't get more than 5 feet before I heard him say, "I want to show you something," loudly, like he was a foot behind me. I turned around to look at him, and all I could make out was his outline. The darkness inside the trees turned him into a shadow, an absence against the backdrop of the woods. I walked back the entire way out of there, never breaking eye contact. Every minute or two I would hear him say, "I want to show you something." When I got back to the house and up on the deck, I made my way inside and turned on the lights in the yard. Forget Dave's parents, I wanted to know what was going on. I saw the Dave-shaped shadow at the edge of the woods, staring at me in the house. Then, it walked into the woods, and was gone. I went upstairs with the intention of waking up his parents and asking them to help me figure out what was wrong. I was seriously worried about his mental state at this point. I got to the top of the stairs to find a half-asleep David coming out of the bathroom. "Where were you, bro?" he asked me. I didn't know how to respond. He hadn't been outside, he was wearing a pair of boxers and nothing else. He'd have to cross the yard, go around the house, come in the front door, sneak past me, make it upstairs and get undressed in the time it took me to walk the 5 feet from the front door to the staircase. I told him what had happened. He didn't believe me at first, but I was a skeptic, and I didn't spook easily. So once he saw how terrified I was, I think he believed me. We didn't go into the woods anymore after that. That October was almost 17 years ago. I haven't been back to those mountains in over a decade. Dave died 2 years ago. A heroin overdose. He had been clean and sober for years but relapsed and was gone. I didn't get to attend his funeral since I live down south now. About a year after he died, I found myself back in New Jersey visiting some friends. His name came up in conversation a few times and we all had stories to share. One of his ex-girlfriends asked me if it was true, the story about the night in the woods when I saw his doppelganger. I told her it was, and it wasn't just in the woods. It was in the house. I swear it sounded exactly like him. I told her I would never forget the way he kept saying that over and over again. We parted ways, and later that night I found myself back in that town. Not on the mountain, but not far, near the house I grew up in. I was in my friend's backyard shortly after dark. He'd gone inside to grab some more beers, and I was trying to unwind before my drive home in the morning. The air was crisp and cool, and the sky was clear. You could see every star. It was a great night, quiet and relaxing. Incredibly quiet. No insects, no animals, nothing. Behind me in the woods, I heard someone whisper. A familiar voice that said, "I want to show you something." And I haven't gone back to New Jersey since.